Hi everyone. For this week's Arts Report, we explore the world of motion through a Black woman's eyes. Now, we know that the motion picture industry is often dominated by men and most of the times by white men. But there is a group of young, dynamic Black women who are moving into the space and are making strides. Take, for example, writer-director Kitumezi Khadi. Now, she's doing phenomenal work at Darling TV. And she explains how, if you want to move into the sector, perhaps it's wise to be open to any kind of opportunity to work. Then there's Mabatu Kao. She's a scriptwriter and story consultant. And she says while it is a tough industry, it's well worth it. Mamem Pahlele is a producer, and I really like her tenacity and zest to just get in there and start working. And Thandiswa Ndaba, she is a post-production producer, and she explains how a simple thing like good communication skills can really help a production work well.
Hi, my name is Kitumezi Khadi, otherwise known as Director Kit. I am a filmmaker and a lover of art and creating stories. So my journey into film did start when I was in high school. I had a very great English teacher, and I remember her classroom was always a really great space where we learned poetry and we really dissected characters. In a lot of the books that we were studying, I can't remember what our school syllabus book was, but the little boy's name was Piggy. Do you remember?
Piggy? No, in high school.
No, in high school, yes. It was, anyway, I've completely forgotten the name of the book now.
Yeah.
But it was a study on this group of boys who...
I know what you're talking about, Lord of the Flies.
Yes, Lord of the Flies,
yes.
Yes. We didn't only just study the actual structure and the storytelling of it, we really got into the characters. And at that point, I realized I just was obsessed with not only storytelling, but with creating characters that felt like real people. And then we did a little bit of film history whilst we were still in high school. And then I had this very good friend. She by then knew that I was interested in film, and I didn't know what film was. I didn't know that it was something accessible. I didn't have an idea in my head. I just liked film study. And her family had this farm in the Eastern Cape, and they were shooting this big Hollywood production on the farm. It was Amelia Earhart, and it was starring Hilary Swank and Richard Gere. And she managed to get us onto the set as runners. So, like my first job, I remember we were so excited, but we just had to give Richard Gere his towel. And we just had to make sure that they had towels all the time. And the director was a female director. And it was just this huge world that I was finally given access to that I didn't know existed. And not only was it my first introduction into film, which was this huge Hollywood production, but it was with a female director that was leading it, and a woman of color. So that completely changed everything that I was thinking about career-wise.
Like most people, I got into the industry hustling, trying to be a content producer. I produced a couple of shows way back, I'm sure when you were very young. Things like Take 5, Cha-Cha, those kinds of shows. But then I also realized that I was more interested in the other aspects of the business, which is more literally the business side of it. So I went and studied in Scotland to do a master's in media management. But then that led me to then come back and work more in the corporate side, which is more the SABC, working as a commissioning editor. But that's where I discovered this innate ability and love to just help writers connect with their creation and their stories. So from then on, I started honing my skill to be I call myself like a story doula, you know, like where I help people birth their stories. So from then on, I worked with different production houses and different writers to do their stories, things like Death of a Queen, and which were really interesting because that was adapting Shakespeare to Africa, which was really exciting at the time.
My name is Mamem Pahlele. and I am an executive and creative producer at Romania Films, and I'm also the founder. So the journey started in 2007. I just finished college. I went to Vega, which is sort of like a brand communication school. We did a project to capture like a small film. And what happened was that I started having the love for production, because what I was studying had nothing to do with production. Because normally you would go to a film school like AVDA and so forth. I fell in love with the project, and I remember saying to my lecturer, I want to go and do an internship at one of the top production houses in South Africa. And that was the strict rule. I said the top production house. And then I got an internship at a company that used to be called Velocity Films. It was still existing at the time. I did my interview with the executive producers there, and I started as a production coordinator, and I worked my way up through to being a producer to where I am today.
Oh man, I just really love directing. I love every single stage of it. There's other stages which are much scarier. The script writing stage is probably the most intimidating space for me to be in, but that is where the magic starts, and that's where the characters are created and the story and the world. And then the development of that, and then the shooting of it, and then working with the talent, and sometimes not working with talent, just a little bit of animation, the post-production. I am completely obsessed with filmmaking and directing. I love the whole process.
My name is Thandiswa Ndaba, and I am a post-production producer. Well, weird story with me. I worked in hotels for about 10 years, and I never ever thought that I would work in post-production. I worked as a front office coordinator in one of the big chain hotels in this country. And I was approached by my CEO because he just loved the person that I was. And he gave me a shot, and that's how I got here. So I've been a post-production producer for about 5 years now. And what it's basically taught me, it's about people. If you communicate well with people.
I won't lie, in South Africa, it's a bit of both. There are those who get gigs that are for long-running series, where it's a soap opera or a telenovela, and that I think is stable. That's stability, and you can live your life. But then on the other hand, there's also spaces where, and this is where I truly believe the art form comes to life, is where you write works that are your true passion, and they express you as a creator, you know. And in those instances, it's not always possible to have a stable income, because as people say, everybody's always got their love project that they're writing for years and years. But I think for me, for instance, as a story consultant, when I wave from being a writer, which is fine, I also balance that with being a story consultant, where I can work in South Africa and outside. So I've worked, let's say, for the Rotterdam Film Lab, I've worked in Australia, I've worked in the Philippines, where I can actually help writers across the globe, and that's what helps keep the income stable a bit more. And it also challenges me creatively, because there's different ways of telling story across the globe, you know.
In the commercial space, it's definitely in a space where it's about telling South African authentic characters, authentic stories. But of course, it is very ad-land, so a lot of the storytelling of these authentic characters are glamorized. I mean, we're selling. Then with documentaries, it's very different. I'm very intentional about the projects that I choose. I choose projects that I either know very little about or I know a lot about. I do enjoy the projects where I know very little about, and they're actually all to do with South African society, history, culture. And there's one particular project that I'd worked on, and we were nominated for a SAFTA for it. It was called Ties That Bind Us, and it was a look at an alternative history, a historical timeline of South Africa. Firstly, you can study film, or you can be self-taught and you can go out into the industry and you can just like get your hands dirty and you can work. With both options, the studying is great because then I guess you jump 3 years ahead from somebody who has to teach themselves, but eventually you need to work. For a young girl sitting and watching or listening to this, I want them to know that it is the year of the female, it is the decade, it is the century of the female. The space is completely ours to take over, and that is what inspired me when I heard the sentence, there aren't a lot of females in the industry. I thought, oh my God, here's a space for me that I can completely come and take over. It's not a thing to be afraid of that there aren't a lot of us. It's a thing to celebrate that we can now come and stand tall.
So I am in a different space of production. I've only done TV commercials because that's the world that I've learned in my career. So I've only done TV commercials. I haven't done any film. I haven't produced any films before. I would say, first of all, believe in yourself and believe in the vision of what you want to do. I remember my parents, especially my dad, even this day, he still doesn't think I've got a career. So he still believes that I am not working. Like literally, he doesn't believe in this. When I finished school, funny enough, I did not even apply anyway. So to the young people out there, I grew up in the townships between Soweto and Alex. You need to be out there. There are actually facilities that you can actually go into that will assist you in getting into the motion picture space. I remember before I even went to Vega, I went to the Imagination Lab, which was an initiative that was part of Vega, but based in Alex. So that's where they taught us about production, about graphic designers, art directors, copywriters. Like we got exposed to the actual industry, that you can be so many things, that you don't only have to be a producer or you don't only have to be a director. So we got to learn all of those elements within that space. So I would say to young people, don't just sit and say things will happen. Do your research, go out there. There are opportunities for everyone.
So a post-production producer basically facilitates the post, whether it being a music video, a television commercial, or short movie. We mainly work on television commercials, so that's what I mostly do.